In a way, I discover my work through found objects, from photographs of ephemeral moments and unrepeatable chance that I collect on my walks, usually walks through the streets or while I'm traveling. I look at the light, the objects, textures, shapes, sounds and smells too. So I like the pace of walking for observation. I think it's kind of meditative. So on this walk today, rather than taking the shortest route, I'm letting the objects I come across decide the way. The path is therefore more wandering than direct. Kumi cup. Solo. Yeah, so I'm realizing care is a large aspect to my practice. My work, especially the photorealistic paintings, is very painstaking and slow. It takes a long time, a lot more time than a lot of other artists. And it's like physically and mentally very demanding. And it requires a lot of discipline in that way, a lot of motivation to get into the studio. And I think that care and time is very evident in the surface of my paintings. You can tell that it's not simply just made in a day. There's lots of layers and more brush strokes and things drying and going over the top. There's a stillness involved, and the objects themselves are very still. So I see this slow and very careful and personal labor as a kind of resistance to the rise of what seems to be, these immaterial economies, which are divorced or abstracted from traditional labor. And I think in our hyper digital age, there's something beautiful and very valuable in slowness, which is why I like walking, and observation, really looking, smelling, sensing, and care. And I think another dimension is added in my work by painting pictures of this particular time of ours, showing clues to what is very material objects and waste in some ways. A lot of my images I'm choosing to paint clues to work, which is often not pictured. So it shows the contradictions and complexities of the world around us despite the smooth, shiny and complete surfaces. So these ideas that I'm thinking about are grounded in art historical kind of context of, for instance, Mio Lederman Ukulele's maintenance art and that manifesto. And the task I'm doing right now, I'm thinking of the work that she did where she shook the hand of everyone in the New York City sanitation department. So literally touching their hands is a really beautiful gesture, touching people's working hands who have handled all of the city's detritus and waste. So the objects, once they're discarded, are now clean and they can be looked at afresh. And we can see them in various ways. One, we could see them as a physical evidence or trace of our walk in the streets on that day, at that time, on that route. So as a group, they represent divergence, many, different, and wandering. Two, they could be looked at in terms of telling us something about a place. A lot can be deduced by looking at a neighborhood's rubbish. So around here in East Williamsburg and Bushwick, it's more industrial area. There's also kind of creative places. There's also a lot of nightlife, bars. We can also think about the objects in terms of their individual histories. If we think about that hair extension, the bottom of a shoe. So we can think about their use, their relation to people's bodies, and the object's own experience. And the fourth thing I thought is to see them anew outside of their context, their use or their history, and just look at them simply from a formal point of view. What is their material? What's their shape, their color? Are they transparent, opaque? Their texture, their line and form. So here we've got all the leftover water from the dirt. It's kind of like the grey water from the washing becomes one big soup. It's like our whole experience of walking and gathering the stuff converges in this one liquid. It's the same. So in a way, it's got the bacteria and molecular shit from the street in the bucket. From here, I feel like there are a lot of different options for what we could do with this in terms of painting. You could mix it with plaster and make a pour. I'm going to try and make a dye with it to make a monochrome. And then I also want to try marbling. So it's really important thinking about divergence in terms of all the different paths and tracks you might take when you're experimenting or working through different processes and conceptual ideas. So I've never done this before. I looked it up how to do it on YouTube. Traditionally, with marbling, you put down some paper towel or something and you drag the surface so there's no dust or anything on the surface, or else these make little marks or mistakes, errors in the print. But we're going to go with that, and I'm actually going to use some of the liquid here and put that into the marbling liquid. I'm going to set this aside and let that become still. And in the meantime, I'm going to use this liquid as a dye for silk. So this is 100% silk, which is a natural material. So I've washed it so that the dye can absorb more, and I've soaked it in alum, a fixative. So we're going to just soak this. I'm going to leave that overnight. I might even try and cook it a little bit, although the stink is already, so it just smells. It's a really hot day as well. So we'll let that stain. I think I kind of got the marbling idea because I'm thinking about divergence in terms of its definition, which is, a road, a route, or a line separating from another route, especially a main one, and go in a different direction. So I think about marbling in terms of these endless circles, expanding, which is sort of what I do with my practice and how I think about ideas and try out different materials. And then I might contract and converge and just look at a certain area and really go deep into that. And then that might lead me to something else, and then it expands and expands and expands. So marbling is sort of like a picture of that in some way. Yes. Yes. The tension of the silk, of the warp and the weft when you pull it is nice with the patterns. It kind of looks like a photocopy, which I like. It's sort of grayscale, faded, and I think it's really nice on the silk because it's getting light, it's illuminating from behind. But yeah, I mean, this could be, you could turn it into a wearable painting in a way, or you could stretch it tight, shine light through it, all kinds of things.